When I discovered my daughter-in-law had another life I never knew about, I felt the ground shift beneath me. And suddenly, everything I believed about my family was a lie. That's how it started. An ordinary Thursday morning with the smell of coffee curling from the kitchen, the sun spilling through the blinds in warm stripes across the living room rug. I had just set the kettle down when my son's phone pinged on the counter. Nothing unusual, except for the glance at the notification that froze me. Her name, not my son's, and a message that didn't belong in our home life. Don't tell anyone about tonight. Everything is ready. I remember the way the mug trembled in my hand as I set it down. My heart was pounding, but my mind refused to go there. It must be nothing, I told myself. She's always busy with work. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's… I don't know. But the unease settled deep, like cold water around my ankles. For years, I had thought of myself and her as family. I had guided her through holidays, birthdays, and every little life decision. I had been proud of her, welcomed her with open arms, and trusted her completely with my son, and by extension, my grandchildren. And now, in a single line of text, that trust felt like it was evaporating. Our mornings were normally calm. I would wake early to bake a few pastries before the family stirred, filling the kitchen with the comforting smell of cinnamon and butter. My son Marcus would shuffle in, groggy but smiling, leaning into hugs from his children. My daughter-in-law Emma would join us, always cheerful, laughing with the kids over spilled cereal or squabbles over coloring books. The home felt alive, warm, predictable. I liked that rhythm. It was the kind of normal that made you forget how fragile trust could be. We weren't perfect. No family is. There were the usual tiffs over chores, homework, and whether anyone had cleaned the coffee machine. But underneath, there was mutual respect. Or so I believed. Emma had always been careful, polite, attentive. When Marcus went on business trips, she would send me texts about how the children were doing, asking for advice. She had, over the years, woven herself into the fabric of our lives. And that's why the thought that she might be hiding something so enormous felt impossible. That Thursday, I tried to shake it off. I poured the coffee, set it on the table, and sat down as if nothing was wrong. The children ran in, still half asleep, their hair sticking out in tufts, pajamas smudged with yesterday's playtime. I hugged them, asked about their dreams, and laughed at the way my grandson tried to convince me that broccoli was, in fact, chocolate. Emma walked in, smiling, carrying a tray of breakfast. Her perfume, light floral, filled the room. Everything looked normal. She kissed the kids, offered me a gentle nod, and said in her usual bright voice, "Good morning, Mom." I returned the greeting with a practiced smile. Inside, however, I was tense, my thoughts spinning. I sipped the coffee, trying to focus on the cinnamon, the soft morning light, the comfort of routine, but my eyes kept drifting to her phone lying on the counter. I know. I should not have looked. It was hers, her privacy, and yet the gnawing sense of unease pulled me closer. Just then, Marcus came in, rubbing his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You look… off." "I'm fine," I said. "Just didn't sleep well." I hoped he would believe me. I needed him not to notice the subtle tremor in my hands, the way I could barely hold my cup steady. He kissed my forehead and headed to get the children dressed for school. The door closed and silence fell. I was left with Emma and the secrets she was hiding, though I didn't yet know the shape or weight of them. By mid-morning, I found myself in the study, ostensibly organizing bills and letters, but my mind couldn't stay away from curiosity. That's when I noticed it. A stack of papers partially hidden behind the ledger, documents in Emma's handwriting, but with a name I did not recognize. Bank statements, leases, and a notarized document listing her as guardian of something. No, someone, without my knowledge. My fingers shook as I leafed through them, heart hammering in disbelief. The first piece of undeniable proof of a life I never knew about hit me like a punch. Emma had a second identity. She had debts, legal entanglements, and, most horrifyingly, plans that could put my grandchildren at risk. My mind raced. Why? How long? How could I have been so blind? For the rest of the morning, I sat frozen at my desk, smelling the faint scent of burnt toast from the toaster downstairs, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear my grandchildren laughing from the playroom and felt my chest tighten. They had no idea what was happening under the surface. They saw only Grandma, only Mommy, only safety. And I was the only one who had glimpsed the truth. I knew I couldn't panic. I had to plan. I had to gather evidence, understand her moves, and, if necessary, protect the family I loved. My hands rested on the documents, the paper crisp under my fingertips, and I made a silent promise. I would not let this betrayal shatter what we had built. Not my grandchildren, not my son, not me. Even now, I remember the quiet of that morning, the weight of reality pressing down, and the knowledge that life as I had known it was changing. Emma walked past the study, humming softly, oblivious to my discovery. I watched her, a small tremor in my lips, and realized that confrontation would be inevitable. I would have to face her. And when I did, I had to do so with both caution and courage. Because this wasn't just about secrets. It was about family, trust, and survival. The days after that Thursday morning were unbearable in silence. Every interaction with Emma became a minefield. Every smile she offered felt like a mask hiding who she really was. I found myself watching her more than usual, noticing little things I had previously ignored. The way her fingers lingered over certain bills, the subtle hesitation in her voice when she spoke about weekend plans, the quiet excitement in her eyes when she mentioned a meeting with friends she refused to name. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it's just stress, I told myself. Maybe she's planning a surprise or managing something I don't need to worry about. But instinct, that unshakable gut feeling, whispered a different truth. I began jotting notes in the small notebook I kept by my bed. Dates, conversations, observations, everything that seemed out of place. The ticking of the wall clock at night became a metronome for my anxiety, each tick reminding me that time was slipping, and with it, my family's safety. It wasn't just her behavior. Marcus had been oblivious, as usual. He trusted her implicitly, just as I once did, and I realized that if I didn't act, he, and the children, might be blindsided. My role had shifted from mother to sentinel. I couldn't tell him yet. I had to be sure. I had to know the full story before confronting anyone. I whispered to myself. The smell of night jasmine drifting through the open window and mingling with the faint aroma of the tea I'd brewed to calm my nerves. The first clue that confirmed my suspicions came subtly, almost innocuously. I was sorting the mail one evening when I noticed an envelope addressed to Emma with a return address from a city 3 hours away. Odd, because she hadn't mentioned traveling. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and I hesitated before opening it. Inside, I found paperwork tied to another identity, another name with her picture attached. Legal documents, financial statements, and, most damning, a notarized consent for temporary guardianship of the children, all under this hidden persona. My heart pounded. I could barely breathe. I sank into the armchair, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the living room. How could she have kept this from us for so long? The audacity, the planning. It was meticulous. She wasn't just hiding things. She was orchestrating a parallel life, I realized, the words echoing in my mind. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence discreetly. I had to understand the extent of her secret life before making any decisions. The files revealed debts, legal entanglements, and plans that could potentially remove my grandchildren from Marcus's custody. Each discovery cut deeper. The woman who had called me mom had been plotting, quietly and cleverly, to manipulate our family for her own benefit. During this time, Emma's behavior remained outwardly perfect. She cooked, laughed, and played with the children, maintaining the illusion of harmony. It was maddening to watch. The smell of her perfume, the same soft floral I once found comforting, now made my stomach turn. I realized that trust, once broken, taints even the simplest moments. One evening, I overheard her on the phone, her voice low and hurried. Yes, everything is in place. They suspect nothing. By next month, it'll be finalized. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the kitchen counter. It wasn't just debts and hidden accounts. She had a timeline, a plan. And it involved taking my grandchildren away from their father. I knew then that inaction was no longer an option. The betrayal was too deep, the risk too high. That night, I couldn't sleep. I traced every document, every message, every hint I had found, piecing together the full picture. The smell of the lavender candle I always lit for calmness couldn't soothe me. I felt rage, fear, and sorrow intertwined in a bitter knot. The next morning, I made my decision. I had to confront her, but on my terms, with preparation and with proof. I didn't want an emotional outburst that could jeopardize the children's safety or alert her before I had control of the situation. For hours, I practiced my words in the mirror, the reflection showing a woman I barely recognized. Tense, wary, but determined. I also knew I couldn't go it alone. I reached out to a trusted lawyer, explaining the situation without revealing unnecessary details to Marcus or anyone else. Their advice was clear: gather everything, ensure legal protection for the children, and plan a confrontation that could not be ignored. I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Relief that there was a way forward. Exhaustion from the weight of months, no years, of deception. By midweek, I had organized the documents into a binder, ready to present. I set up a discreet camera in the study, not to embarrass anyone, but to ensure I had incontrovertible evidence. Every piece of paper, every email, every signed consent was accounted for. The smell of fresh ink and paper filled the study, mingling with the lingering scent of the vanilla candle I kept lit. It was a small comfort amidst the turmoil. The children remained blissfully unaware, laughing over blocks and coloring books in the living room. Marcus, still trusting, asked why I looked so serious, why my eyes darted toward Emma more often than usual. I smiled softly, hiding the truth. Just tired, I said, though the words felt hollow. I wished I could shield them from the storm I knew was coming. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed every memory of Emma's time in our home. Her laughter, her hugs, the whispered confessions of love for me. They all felt like part of a cruel performance. My mind circled the inevitability of confrontation, the necessity of protecting the family I loved more than anything. And beneath it all, a strange calm settled over me. I had uncovered the truth. I had a plan. I would not be powerless. I closed my eyes, the faint hum of the ceiling fan above mixing with the distant chirping of crickets. In the stillness, I promised myself, I will face her. I will protect my grandchildren. And I will not let betrayal define me. The morning of the confrontation, I felt the weight of every secret I had uncovered pressing on my chest. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft cream blouse and a tailored skirt. Something that said calm authority, not anger. I wanted Emma to see me fully aware, fully in control, and yet not unkind. My reflection in the mirror stared back, a mixture of determination and sorrow, and I whispered to myself, "You've done everything right." Stay steady, I found Emma in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The smell of frying bacon and fresh toast filled the air, a cruel reminder of the ordinary life she had almost perfectly staged. She looked up and smiled at me. "Good morning, Mom. Did you sleep well?" I returned the smile, carefully neutral. "I need to talk to you. In private." Her smile faltered slightly, a subtle flash of unease crossing her face, but she masked it quickly. "Of course," she said, leading me to the study. She leaned against the doorway, crossing her arms as though she were ready for a casual chat rather than a reckoning. I opened the binder I had meticulously prepared, sliding it onto the desk between us. "I found these," I said softly. My voice was calm, deliberate. I know about your other identity, your debts, and your plans to change custody arrangements for the children without Marcus or me knowing. Emma's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed. I don't know what you mean, she said, her tone clipped but carefully measured. I let the silence stretch, watching her, feeling the subtle tremor in her hands. I've gone through the documents, the legal forms, the financial statements. Everything points to a plan you've been hiding from this family for years. Tell me, Emma, how long were you planning this? Her facade cracked. The cheerful, warm woman I thought I knew flickered, replaced by someone calculating and defensive. I needed security. I needed to ensure my children were safe if anything happened, she stammered. Her eyes darted toward the study door, the hallway, anywhere but mine. Your children? I asked slowly, my voice even but icy. We're talking about my grandchildren, Emma. You mean my family, the children you promised to love and protect. And you plan to take them away? Behind our backs? She hesitated, and I could see the truth reflected in her expression. I didn't know another way, she whispered. I felt a pang of sorrow. For all the anger and betrayal, a small part of me recognized the fear and desperation that had fueled her deception. But the harm she could have caused, could still cause, was too great. Emma, I trusted you, I said, each word carefully measured. I welcomed you into this family. I guided you, I supported you, and all the while you were hiding this from me. From Marcus, from everyone. Do you understand the weight of this? Her gaze dropped to the floor. I do now, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, letting the room absorb the tension. I wasn't here to yell, to shame, or to humiliate. That wasn't my way. I was here to protect my family and to make sure she understood that betrayal has consequences. I laid out the timeline I had built, the documents, the emails, the notarized papers, and the messages. Every piece of evidence was undeniable. Emma's face paled as she reviewed the evidence. I didn't think you'd find out, she muttered. I didn't mean. You didn't think, Emma. I interrupted gently but firmly. That's the problem. You acted without regard for the people who trusted you. You put the children, Marcus, and our entire family at risk. And for what? Your own gain, your sense of control? Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked small, fragile even. I was scared. I thought it was the only way to protect myself, she said. I shook my head slowly. Fear does not justify betrayal. Not when it involves family. Not when it involves innocent children. You should have come to us. You should have trusted us. She sat in silence, tears pooling in her eyes. I felt a deep, conflicted ache. I was furious, yes, but I also couldn't ignore the bond that had existed once. I took a step closer, resting a hand on the binder. You made choices, Emma. Choices that could have destroyed everything. You need to understand that what you've done cannot be ignored. But there is a way to make this right. Her voice trembled. And what would that be? Transparency, I said firmly. No more secrets. You will cut ties with these other plans and accounts. You will involve Marcus, and you will work to rebuild trust, not just with him, but with me, with the children. And understand this. If you attempt to move forward without honesty, there will be consequences, legal and personal. I won't let you jeopardize my family. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I understand. I can fix this. I let the silence stretch again, feeling the tension ebb slightly. I wasn't naive. I knew this wouldn't erase months or years of deception instantly, but the first step had been taken. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a promise of transparency. As she left the study, I felt the weight of control settling back into my chest. I had faced the betrayal. confronted it with evidence and dignity, and protected my family from immediate harm. The next steps would be careful monitoring, rebuilding trust, and ensuring Marcus knew the truth. But for the first time in days, I felt a small spark of relief. The children ran past the study, laughing and shouting, oblivious to the storm that had just passed. Marcus appeared moments later, curious about the quiet tension, but I smiled and gestured toward breakfast. "Everything's fine," I said. And in a way, it was. I had taken the first step to protect what mattered most. But as I poured another cup of tea and watched Emma move about the kitchen, I reminded myself, this was only the beginning. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild, and vigilance must accompany forgiveness. I would be patient, careful, and unwavering. My family's safety and our future depended on it. In the days that followed, I watched Emma closely, carefully balancing my vigilance with the need to maintain a sense of normalcy for the children. I couldn't let them sense the tension that lingered beneath the surface of our household. Breakfasts were cheerful, school drop-offs routine, and evenings spent reading or playing board games remained untouched by the storm of deceit. But I kept my binder close, my notes updated, every interaction scrutinized. Marcus remained blissfully unaware of the full scope, and for that, I was grateful. He trusted his wife completely, as any loving husband might. It pained me to carry this knowledge alone, but I knew exposing it prematurely could have unintended consequences for the children and the household. I felt the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders, like a silent guardian standing between chaos and safety. One afternoon, as Emma was preparing lunch, I decided it was time to take further steps. I had consulted with the lawyer, and we had a plan to safeguard the grandchildren legally without alarming Marcus. My hands trembled slightly as I drafted formal notices and secured additional documents, but the act itself brought a strange calm. Action, thoughtful, controlled action, was the antidote to fear. The first subtle move of my plan involved gathering allies I could trust without revealing the full details. I confided in a close friend, someone who had known the family for decades, someone whose counsel I valued. Over tea, I laid out the situation carefully, emphasizing the need for discretion. She nodded, a grave expression on her face, and promised to support me, offering advice and practical steps to ensure the children's safety. Meanwhile, Emma continued her routines, seemingly unaware of the quiet storm swirling around her. I watched her, noting the way she interacted with the children, the small gestures of affection and attention, all while keeping a mental ledger of her behaviors. There was still guilt in her eyes at times, fleeting but visible, and I reminded myself to use that carefully in planning the next steps. One evening, I overheard her speaking on the phone again. Her voice was low, tentative, anxious. "Yes, I'll follow through with the plan, but only after everything is settled at home. They suspect nothing." My stomach dropped. Even after our confrontation, there were lingering intentions she hadn't abandoned. It confirmed my suspicion. I needed to act decisively and swiftly to prevent any further risk. I took a deep breath, feeling the quiet determination settling over me. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection and justice. I couldn't allow anger to cloud my judgment. I needed a strategy, calculated, precise, and effective. I revisited my binder, reviewing every piece of evidence, every legal clause, every conversation I had documented. My mind was methodical, mapping out every step that would lead to exposing her fully while keeping Marcus and the children insulated from harm. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A community gala was scheduled that weekend, a high-profile event attended by many mutual friends and family members. Emma had plans to attend, and Marcus would be there as well. I realized this could be the setting where the consequences of her actions would naturally unfold. It was public, controlled, and yet intimate enough that the truth could not be ignored. I spent hours preparing, ensuring that every legal document, every proof of her deceit, was organized and accessible. I rehearsed my words in the mirror, imagining her reactions, the subtle but undeniable reveal that would expose her duplicity. I wasn't planning humiliation. I was planning justice, transparency, and protection for my family. The night of the gala, the air was crisp and the lights warm, golden, casting a soft glow over the elegantly dressed attendees. The music, soft but lively, filled the grand hall, blending with murmurs of laughter and conversation. I felt my pulse steady as we arrived, Marcus unaware of the emotional storm trailing behind us. Emma's eyes sparkled as she greeted friends, her charm and grace on full display. I moved with calm precision, observing her interactions while keeping my composure. The moment arrived when I subtly drew her aside under the guise of introducing her to an acquaintance. With the children safe elsewhere and Marcus momentarily distracted, I produced the binder, placing it between us discreetly. "Emma?" I said softly, but with authority. "We need to talk." Here and now, her eyes flicked to the binder, a flash of recognition and panic crossing her face. "Not here," she whispered, but there was nowhere to hide. I opened the binder just enough for the first pages to be visible. The documents, notarized consents, financial statements, all neatly organized. "You promised transparency," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. And yet, I continue to see evidence of plans that could endanger the children and deceive Marcus. This stops now. Right here. Right in front of those who care for this family. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the binder, but I held firm, meeting her gaze. The weight of the room, the presence of mutual friends, the soft glow of chandeliers, the hushed murmurs of curiosity around us, ensured that the truth could no longer be hidden. The revelation was immediate. Gasps, whispers, subtle shifts in attention. Emma's carefully constructed world began to crumble, the carefully maintained illusion falling apart piece by piece. She turned pale, her eyes darting to Marcus, who had finally noticed the tension. Confusion, concern, and shock crossed his face as he approached, asking quietly what was happening. I took a deep breath. "Marcus, there are things about Emma's life that you need to know," I said gently. "Things that have been hidden for far too long." I felt a wave of relief as the burden of secrecy finally lifted, replaced by the clarity of truth and the opportunity to rebuild. The room felt electric, charged with tension and anticipation. Marcus's eyes were wide, searching mine for some explanation, while Emma's gaze flickered between us, panic rising in her expression. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand, a gentle yet firm gesture. "Let me show you first," I said, keeping my voice calm. I flipped through the binder, letting the documents speak for themselves. The legal forms, the financial statements, the notarized consents that revealed her plans to secure temporary custody under a false identity. The murmurs around us grew louder, whispers of shock and disbelief circulating like ripples in a pond. Friends we had known for years exchanged glances, some in sympathy, some in quiet disapproval, but all aware that a hidden truth was being laid bare. Marcus's face went pale as he read the documents, his hands trembling slightly. "Emma, is this true?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Emma's defenses crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked to me as if seeking some mercy I wasn't ready to grant yet. I didn't know how to. I didn't mean—" "Emma," I interrupted softly, holding her gaze with unwavering steadiness. "Intentions do not erase actions. You've put this family, my grandchildren, in a position of vulnerability. You need to understand that actions have consequences." Her shoulders slumped, the proud posture she carried for so long finally dissolving. I see that now. Enough," I said, my tone firm but not cruel. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room, the quiet scrutiny, the moral weight of the moment. You need to step back and face what you've done honestly. With Marcus, with this family, and most importantly, with yourself. Only then can there be any chance of rebuilding trust. I watched as Emma, broken and tearful, nodded. For the first time, she seemed small, vulnerable, stripped of the carefully crafted facade she had carried for years. And though my heart ached for the children who had unknowingly been caught in the middle, I felt a flicker of hope. The truth had been revealed, and now no one could manipulate or deceive again without consequence. Marcus took a step toward me, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "Thank you," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. I I had no idea." I gave a small, reassuring smile. "It's not about blame, Marcus. It's about protecting our family and ensuring that our children are safe. We will navigate this together." The rest of the night passed in a haze of hushed conversations and difficult explanations. Friends offered quiet support, some expressing shock, others gratitude that the truth had come to light before irreparable damage occurred. Emma, meanwhile, was escorted to a quieter space, the gravity of her actions finally sinking in. There was no yelling, no public humiliation. Justice, I reminded myself, did not need cruelty to be effective. Over the following weeks, the consequences of Emma's deception unfolded in measured ways. The legal protections for the children were finalized, ensuring that no unilateral actions could be taken without Marcus's knowledge. Financial discrepancies and debts were addressed, some resolved through careful negotiation, others through legal channels. Emma faced accountability, not through public shaming, but through clear boundaries and structured oversight. Throughout it all, my focus remained on healing the family unit. The children sensed the tension initially, but with careful guidance, they returned to their routines: bedtime stories, homework sessions, Sunday outings, anchored by the stability Marcus and I provided. I spent quiet moments with each child, reinforcing that the world was still safe and that while mistakes had been made, love and family endured. Emma's presence in our lives became limited and carefully monitored. She participated in counseling, both individually and with Marcus, attempting to understand the motivations behind her secrecy and to rebuild at least some level of trust. It was slow, painstaking work, and I reminded myself constantly that rebuilding trust is not about forgetting. It's about consistent, verifiable action over time. In the quiet hours of the evening, I often reflected on the journey we had traversed. I thought about the initial shock of discovery, the heartbreak, the meticulous planning, and finally the public revelation that allowed truth and justice to prevail. Each step had been painful, but each step had been necessary. I realized that strength is not born from avoiding betrayal. It is forged in the fire of facing it with clarity, dignity, and unwavering commitment to what is right. I also reflected on Emma, the woman who had once been embraced as family, now standing on the other side of a chasm created by her own choices. There was sorrow in that reflection, not for her, but for the potential lost, for the innocence of the children she had nearly endangered. Forgiveness was not immediate, nor was it simple, but I allowed space for understanding, that people can act out of fear, desperation, and misguided self-preservation. With time, our family found a new rhythm. Laughter returned to the house, soft and tentative at first, then genuine. Meals became communal again, with shared stories and quiet jokes. Marcus, now fully aware of the depth of Emma's deception, leaned on me for guidance, and together we fortified the family against any future threats. The children thrived in an environment of honesty and safety, their trust in us reinforced by the stability and protection we provided. Through this ordeal, I learned lessons that went beyond immediate family drama. I learned that intuition must never be ignored, that careful observation and measured action can prevent harm, and that confrontation, when guided by evidence and principle, can restore order and protect innocence. Most importantly, I learned that resilience is born from the courage to face betrayal, not to hide from it, and that healing, true healing, requires both justice and compassion. As I sit now, in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun streaming through the curtains, I feel a profound sense of peace. The storm has passed, the truth has been revealed, and our family stands intact. I have found strength I didn't know I possessed, and I carry forward a renewed sense of purpose, to protect, to guide, and to love with eyes wide open. In the weeks that followed the gala, life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the air carried the subtle weight of what had happened. Marcus was cautious but grateful, leaning on me for guidance as we navigated the aftermath of Emma's exposure. Our bond as mother and son strengthened in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had seen firsthand the consequences of hidden lives, and together we worked to shield the children from further emotional turbulence. Emma was no longer the unmonitored presence in our home. Every step she took was observed, not with vindictiveness, but with the careful attention of someone safeguarding what truly mattered: the children's stability and well-being. Legal arrangements ensured that she could not act unilaterally or without consent, and counseling sessions were structured and supervised. I watched from a distance, feeling a strange mix of pity and relief. She was accountable now, a reality she could no longer evade. Marcus and I took deliberate steps to restore the home to a space of trust and warmth. Morning routines became structured but gentle. The smell of coffee brewing, the soft hum of school lessons, the laughter that returned slowly as the children reclaimed their innocence. I spent hours with them after school, guiding homework, listening to stories of their day, their voices a comforting reminder of why I had fought so hard to protect this family. One evening, as I tucked the youngest into bed, she whispered, "Grandma, will everything be okay now?" Her wide eyes, full of trust, pierced my heart. I stroked her hair gently and smiled, holding her close. "Yes, darling. We're safe now. Everything is going to be okay." The weight of my role, the protector, the anchor, settled warmly in my chest. This was the purpose behind every difficult conversation, every careful observation, every plan I had executed. I also took time for myself, something I hadn't allowed in months. Long walks in the early morning, the smell of wet earth after rain, the quiet rustle of leaves. It all became my sanctuary. I journaled my thoughts, reflecting on betrayal, trust, resilience, and the lessons learned. I realized that healing was not just about restoring the family. It was about reclaiming myself, understanding my own boundaries, and acknowledging my strength. There were moments of reflection that brought both sorrow and clarity. I thought of Emma, the woman who had so nearly disrupted everything we held dear. I realized that her actions, while inexcusable, were rooted in fear and insecurity. Forgiveness, I decided, was not about absolving her entirely, but about freeing myself from the lingering bitterness that could erode my peace. I allowed space in my heart for understanding, while keeping firm boundaries to protect the family. Marcus and I began discussing the future: how to educate the children about honesty and integrity without exposing them to undue fear, how to reinforce family bonds, and how to ensure that no secret could threaten our home again. We created small rituals: weekly family dinners, storytelling evenings, and shared moments that strengthened our unity. Each ritual, each intentional act of love, rebuilt trust brick by brick, restoring both the home and the heart. The transformation in the household was subtle but profound. Laughter returned naturally, not forced. The children's questions became open and curious rather than hesitant and guarded. The home, once tinged with suspicion and tension, became a space of warmth, predictability, and security. I felt a sense of accomplishment, not for the confrontation itself, but for the careful, steady work of rebuilding what had been threatened. I also allowed myself to extend cautious compassion toward Emma. I realized that she too was human, flawed, and capable of reflection. I met her for structured conversations, focused on the well-being of the children. Always calm, always dignified. She began to understand the magnitude of her mistakes, taking tangible steps to correct them. I witnessed small acts of accountability: turning over financial records, attending counseling, and openly acknowledging her deception. Each step was slow, but it reinforced the principle that actions, not words alone, define character. In this period of rebuilding, I discovered a renewed sense of purpose. I became more deliberate in nurturing family bonds, more attuned to subtle changes in behavior, and more confident in my ability to protect what was precious. The experience had tested me in ways I hadn't imagined, but it had also revealed an inner strength that was quiet, steadfast, and unshakable. Looking back, I realized the true lesson of the ordeal. Betrayal, though painful, can illuminate the depth of one's resilience. Deception, while threatening, can strengthen vigilance and empathy. And most importantly, when faced with the choice to respond with rage or reason, the power of calm, measured action can preserve what is truly valuable: family, trust, and peace of mind. As the months passed, our family emerged stronger, more connected, and more aware of the fragile beauty of honesty. The children thrived, Marcus and I grew closer, and the home became a sanctuary once more. The echoes of past deception lingered only as reminders of lessons learned, never as shadows that could undermine our joy. In quiet moments, I often reflected on the journey: the shock of discovery, the confrontation, the careful planning, the public revelation, and finally the steady work of healing. Each stage had been necessary, each emotion valid, and each action deliberate. I had faced betrayal without losing myself, guided my family with wisdom and courage, and emerged with a renewed sense of strength and dignity. And now, sitting by the window on a warm afternoon, listening to the children laugh in the yard, I smiled softly to myself. Life had restored its rhythm. The storm had passed, and the sun, golden and steady, illuminated a family that had endured, learned, and grown stronger. I realized that while we cannot control the choices of others, we can choose how we respond: with dignity, with love, and with unwavering commitment to what truly matters. My family was safe, my children were happy, and I had reclaimed both my peace and my power.